there was ever a game that needed a re-release, it was The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. But this was not what I wanted. Skyward Sword tells an amazing tale detailing the origins of the Master Sword and the timeless struggle between Zelda, Link, and Gannon. But the damn gameplay makes this a pain in the ass to enjoy for a busy gamer. And since playing Breath of the Wild, it is quite clear why the Zelda formula was well worn out by the time Skyward Sword was released. Welcome back to No Time Gamer, the channel helping your gaming sessions be time well spent. Motion controls were all the rage back in the days of the Wii, and admittedly, I loved the novelty at the time, but long games just don't work with waggle, and Skyward Sword is a primary example of why this fails. Unlike Mario Odyssey, which can introduce one-off ideas or limited-use motion gimmicks, Zelda games are much longer and have gameplay elements that will be prominent throughout the extended campaign. And flailing my arms about for hours on end for games that should be enjoyed in a relaxed position wasn't fun then and isn't fun now. Now, it is possible to play the game without motion controls, but this is almost more awkward and poor performing. If you disable motion controls, the right analog stick is used in place of the controller motions. Hit the stick up if you want to replicate swinging the controller up. Roll it in a circle motion to do the sword spin. Push it up and back to swing on vines. It is more annoying and less intuitive than the motion controls, especially because you have to hold down the L button to enable camera control with the right joystick. I constantly whipped out my sword when all I wanted to do was look around the area because I forgot to hold down L. I lost interest playing this game in 2011 because of the controls, and that still holds true today. This highlights another issue I have with this HD remastering. It doesn't do enough to justify a $60 purchase if you played it before. They do cut down on some of the tutorials, PHY interruptions, and you can speed through the overabundance of dialogue a little quicker, but the game is still completely dependent on poor controls. The gameplay mechanics are not tweaked enough to truly accommodate a normal control scheme. It's yet another remaster by Nintendo where little was done other than minor quality of life tweaks and a graphical polishing. Also, I'm one of the people that absolutely loves Breath of the Wild, and in many ways, this has ruined other Zelda titles for me. The freedom that was introduced in Breath of the Wild can't be undone, and Skyward Sword makes it quite clear why Nintendo has moved forward from the older structure of Zelda games. The beginning intro tutorial of Skyward Sword is so terribly boring now, especially playing it for a second time, and the lands you visit don't have the same level of discovery and satisfaction you get when finding new locations in Breath of the Wild. Between this, the long sections of dialogue, low difficulty, overabundant item announcements, and how-tos, I couldn't get the usual joy I find in Zelda games. Things aren't all bad. This is a Zelda game, and no Zelda game is truly terrible. The story is compelling and an essential piece of Zelda lore. Learning of the Master Sword origin and the connection of Link to Zelda and Ganon is great. Nintendo also continues their ability to make the world comfortable, strange, and downright unusual all at once in Skyward Sword. And if you miss traditional dungeons and non-breakable weapons while playing Breath of the Wild, this is a nice return to Zelda normalcy, as the overworlds are labyrinthian in design and equipment and weapons last throughout the game. But here's the rub. As good as the story is, as colorful as the world and characters are, the motion controls ruin the game. Almost every boss fight or challenging section was only a challenge because I was trying to manipulate the controller to do what I wanted it to do. I had to constantly recenter the pointer, which is easy enough to do, but annoying to have to do so. Sword swings also didn't do what I expected about half the time, and almost every time I pulled up a targeting weapon like the beetle, the reticle went off the rails until centering. If Skyward Sword had a more traditional control scheme and not the motion-controlled replication on the right stick, I would love this game, but this forced motion novelty makes it a chore to enjoy. If you love everything Zelda, I'm not going to convince you to avoid this title. It still has a great story and is worth seeing if you really need your Zelda lore fully fleshed out. If you played it before, you're not going to find a lot new here other than some greatly enhanced visuals. If you really want to know what happened in the story, I suggest finding a YouTube video that explains the whole thing, because for busy gamers, The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD is time hardly well spent.